In the sweltering nights of Antebellum, Georgia, a slave named Thomas slipped through bolted doors like a ghost from the book of Revelation, unseen, untouchable, wielding a power that made plantation lords tremble before their own sins. But this wasn't sorcery, it was retribution, forged in the fires of hidden atrocities, where guilt became a chain no master could escape. What secret bound them? And why did divine justice choose him as its vessel? The air hung heavy that August night in 1857, thick with the scent of blooming magnolias and the faint, acrid tang of lantern oil from the overseer's patrols. The Hartley plantation sprawled across the Georgia lowlands like a sprawling beast, its white-columned mansion glowing faintly under a sickle moon, casting long shadows that seemed to whisper of buried wrongs. Inside, the house breathed with the creaks of aged timber, floors polished to a sheen by hands that knew no rest. Elizabeth Hartley lay in her four-poster bed, the linen sheets clinging to her skin in the oppressive humidity, her mind drifting through fragments of scripture she'd read that morning, verses from Psalms about the wicked being snared in the work of their own hands. Little did she know how prophetic those words would prove. The clock in the hallway struck midnight, its chimes echoing like a tolling bell for the damned. Then came the sound, not a creak, not a whisper, but the soft, deliberate click of her bedroom door easing shut. Her eyes snapped open, heart slamming against her ribcage like a prisoner begging for release. The room was a cavern of darkness, broken only by slivers of moonlight slicing through the heavy velvet curtains, painting the wallpaper in ghostly patterns of vines and thorns, reminders, perhaps, of the garden's fall, where sin first took root. She held her breath, ears straining against the silence, convincing herself it was the wind, the house settling, anything but what her instincts screamed, intrusion. But there, at the foot of her bed, materialized a silhouette tall, broad-shouldered, unmoving as a statue carved from obsidian. The air grew colder, as if his presence drew the warmth from the room, leaving only the chill of impending reckoning. Elizabeth's mind raced through prayers half-remembered from childhood, invocations against evil spirits, but this was no apparition from folklore. This was flesh and blood, a man whose eyes gleamed faintly in the dim light, holding secrets deeper than the abyss. Her hand trembled toward the bell pull, that silken cord promising salvation, servants, guards, her husband's rifle-toting men rushing in. Inches away, her fingers froze as the shadow stirred. "No need for alarm, ma'am," the voice came, low and resonant, carrying the cadence of distant lands, laced with a courtesy that bordered on mockery. It was the voice of a man who had stared into the heart of human depravity and emerged unbroken, perhaps even sanctified by suffering. "I've no intent to harm. Only to deliver what rightfully belongs in your hands." Elizabeth's throat constricted, words emerging as a rasp. Who are you? How did you get in here?" Her mind flashed to the lock's iron bolts forged in Savannah's finest smithy, secured each night by the butler under her husband's strict orders. The windows, latched with brass fittings imported from England. The grounds, prowled by 3 overseers, their boots crunching gravel in rhythmic patrols, accompanied by hounds whose bays could wake the dead. These dogs, bred for ferocity, had been trained to scent blood and fear, costing Richard a small fortune, $200 apiece, he'd boasted at dinner parties, as if money could buy loyalty from beasts or men. The figure stepped forward slightly, moonlight catching the edge of his coat, a garment too refined for a field hand, its wool dyed a deep indigo that evoked the midnight sea crossings he'd endured. "Thomas, ma'am. I tend your fields by day. But tonight, I bring truth from the shadows." He reached into the coat's inner pocket, movements deliberate as a priest handling sacraments, and placed a small, leather-bound volume on the mahogany dresser. The thud was soft, yet it echoed in her soul like the fall of a gavel in judgment. "What is that?" she whispered, dread coiling in her gut like the serpent in Eden, tempting with forbidden knowledge. "Something Mr. Hartley left behind in Savannah," Thomas replied, his tone even, almost paternal. "At the Parker Hotel, under a name not his own. Secrets have a way of finding light, ma'am. Like the biblical lamp under a bushel, eventually, it burns through." She watched, paralyzed, as he turned toward the door. "Wait, how? The doors are barred." "The guards." Thomas paused, hand on the knob, which turned soundlessly, as if oiled by invisible hands. "Locks hold only those who fear them. But for one who knows the weight of chains, doors yield to greater forces. Read it, ma'am. Before he returns. Knowledge is the key to your own cage." Then he was gone, footsteps fading down the grand staircase, not the creaking servants' stairs hidden in the rear, but the marble steps reserved for the elite, echoing with a defiance that mocked the house's hierarchy. Elizabeth remained frozen, the room's silence now oppressive, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl, a harbinger, in old tales, of death or revelation. Minutes stretched into eternity before she rose, bare feet cold on the Persian rug, approaching the dresser as one might a confessional. The journal was exquisite, bound in calfskin, embossed with gold that caught the moonlight like fool's gold, beautiful, yet deceptive. She carried it to the window, parting the curtains to flood the room with silver light, and cracked it open. Richard's script stared back, precise, angular, the hand of a man who balanced ledgers of cotton and souls with equal detachment. The first entry, March 1845. Met with J.H., F.B., W.P., and Judge K. on the Georgia coastal venture. Stake, $15,000 each. Projected yield, 400% in 3 years. Risks high, but ruin awaits otherwise. We proceed. May the Lord have mercy on our souls. Mercy? Elizabeth's breath hitched. The pages unfolded like a scroll of sins, detailing investments in shadows, ships slipping through fog-shrouded inlets, cargoes listed not as goods but as units, bribes to officials whose names she knew from church pews and county balls. Joshua Harper, the deacon with a voice like thunder in hymns, Franklin Bradford, whose wife hosted teas preaching Christian charity, William Patterson, infamous for his whip's crack echoing like Judgment Day, Judge Marcus Kent, arbiter of law in a land where justice bent to wealth. Then, the Veil tore, July 1845. Nightingale docked at Brunswick Inlet under cover of night. Captain Williams tallies 247 arrivals, 31 perished en route, storms and fever claimed them. Survivors emaciated, but Harper's contacts in Charleston promise quick sales. Net, $80,000 post-expenses. Venture thrives. Her world tilted. Smuggling, not the domestic trade, vile as it was, but direct from Africa's shores, defying the 1808 ban, treaties with Britain, the very laws her husband cited in debates over states' rights. Each page deepened the abyss, voyages catalogued with clinical precision, lives reduced to numbers, women separated from infants, men chained in holds reeking of despair, deaths dismissed as acceptable losses. Profits funneled into plantations, churches, even the local orphanage, blood money laundering sin into sanctity. By dawn's first blush, Elizabeth had devoured it all, the journal's weight now a millstone around her neck. Outside, the fields stirred, slaves emerging from ramshackle cabins, their songs of sorrow rising like psalms of lamentation. Some among them, she realized with horror, might be those very smuggled souls, their scars hidden beneath tattered clothes, their spirits unbroken by whips but forged in transatlantic hell. The moral rot seeped into her. Richard, pillar of the community, elder in their Presbyterian church, quoting proverbs on honesty while trafficking in human misery. It was biblical hypocrisy, Pharisees whitewashing tombs full of dead men's bones. But the deeper terror, how had Thomas, an enslaved field hand, procured this damning tome? Why deliver it to her, the wife, rather than authorities? Was this mercy, or a calculated strike, like David's stone against Goliath? She rang for the maid, voice steady despite the storm within. Check the locks. All of them. The report came swiftly, every door bolted, windows secure, overseers swearing no breach, dogs silent save a brief whine at midnight as if sensing not threat, but inevitability. Yet Thomas had traversed it all, a living spectre, embodying the proverb, the wicked flee when no man pursueth, but the righteous are bold as a lion. 3 days later, Richard returned, carriage wheels crunching gravel like bones underfoot. He entered with fanfare, silks for Elizabeth, a doll for young Sarah, tales of Savannah's bustling ports and sealed deals. His laugh rang hollow to her ears, eyes darting as if pursued by unseen furies. Dinner passed in tense civility, Sarah's chatter a fragile veil over the chasm. Once the child slept and servants withdrew, Elizabeth confronted him in the study, firelight dancing on oak panels like hellfire shadows. She placed the journal on his desk amid scattered ledgers, symbols of his dual life. The brandy decanter slipped, shattering amber across papers, the scent sharp as guilt's sting. Richard's face drained of color, eyes widening like Saul on Damascus Road, struck by blinding truth. Where, how, he stammered, collapsing into his leather chair, the one where he plotted fortunes on the backs of the oppressed. Thomas, she said, voice like tempered steel. He entered our chamber at midnight, stood sentinel at our bed's end, laid this upon the dresser, and departed through locked portals as if they were veils of mist. Past hounds and rifles, using the grand stare like a conqueror. Richard's hands trembled, burying his face, a gesture of defeat or prayer. Thomas, in our home. God help us. I read it, she pressed, anger and betrayal surging like a flood from Leviticus curses. Every vile detail, the nightingale, the bribes, the cargo of souls stolen from distant shores. You, a smuggler of flesh, defying heaven and law. Hanging awaits such men, Richard. Divine retribution for playing God with lives. He raised his head, eyes haunted by ghosts of his making. Elizabeth, you don't understand. The times were desperate, debts mounting like Babel's tower, threatening ruin. We convinced ourselves it was survival, not sin. Lies, she spat. You quoted scripture at suppers while chaining innocents. How does a slave hold your confession? Why not silence him eternally? A bitter laugh escaped him, echoing hollow. Silence? Impossible. He possesses duplicates scattered like seeds of judgment, to sprout if harm befalls him. To marshals, abolitionist presses, even British envoys hunting slavers. One misstep, and the noose tightens on us all. She paced, skirts whispering like accusations. How many ensnared? The journal names Harper, Bradford, Patterson, Kent, pillars of our society, now pillars of salt, looking back on Sodom's sins. 15 in total, he confessed, voice cracking. Thomas was our scribe, arrived on the second ship, literate from African tutors, a rarity we exploited. He tracked every transaction, every bribe, ensuring fair division among thieves. We thought enslavement bound him tighter than irons. Folly, she murmured, echoing Ecclesiastes' vanities. You armed him with your own weapons. For 9 years, he's haunted you? He nodded, defeated. Thrice weekly, he invades our sanctums, not for demands, but presence. A silent specter, reminding us of inverted chains. We dare not bar him, lest he unleash the deluge. Elizabeth approached the window, gazing into the velvet night. Stars pricked the sky like watchful eyes, God's witnesses to earthly transgressions. There's more. The journal's numbers lie incomplete. Richard's silence stretched, a confession in itself. Yes. Thomas kept dual ledgers, one for our illusions, one for truth's harsh light. The rail toll, thousands more, deaths unreported, families rent asunder like temple veils. Not mere smuggling, but murder, fraud, sins crying to heaven for vengeance. Horror. Stomach churned, visions of biblical plagues assailing her, bloodied waters, darkened skies, firstborn slain. You deserve exposure. Let justice roll like waters. But us, he pleaded. You, Sarah? Widows of the hanged, shamed in society's gaze? Our home seized, legacy ashes. The weight pressed her, a crown of thorns. Practicality warred with righteousness, could she condemn him without self-immolation? What then? Cower in shadows? We endure, he whispered. Pray his mercy holds, that time buries sins before graves claim us. Outside, a shadow stirred near the oaks, Thomas, perhaps, vigilant as an avenging angel. Elizabeth felt the spiritual chill, this was no mere tale of crime, but parable of hubris, where masters became slaves to guilt, and the oppressed wielded divine equity. The legacy haunted, a reminder that retribution, like manna, falls unforeseen. Yet Thomas's world was no triumph. On Patterson's domain, cruelty reigned supreme, whips singing psalms of pain, rations meager as widows' mites. Thomas toiled under son's merciless gaze, hands callous like martyrs' palms, back bowed yet unbowed. His cabin, a hovel of mud and thatch, leaked rains that symbolized tears unshed. Meals, cornbread gritty as sand, pork rind tough as leather, greens wilted from meager plots. But thrice weekly, post-sunset, he transformed. Washing in a tin basin, donning the pilfered coat stolen by old Ruth years prior, a small rebellion, he strode to the mansion. Path lit by fireflies, like souls guiding the way. Overseer's averted eyes, rifles limp. Once, Dutch challenged, met Thomas's gaze of prophetic certainty. Mr. Patterson awaits. The bluff held, fear's alchemy turning threat to passage. Inside, the opulence mocked, crystal chandeliers twinkling like false stars, wallpapers imported from Paris depicting idyllic scenes belying brutality. Patterson's wife embroidered in the parlor, needle pricking fabric like conscience's jabs. Children dined on porcelain, oblivious to the ghost. In their midst, Thomas entered the study, standing threshold for 60 heartbeats, time enough for Patterson's hand to quake on his tumbler, whiskey spilling like sacrificial blood. No words exchanged, presence sufficed, a living indictment, echoing Job's trials or Daniel's lion's den defiance. Retreating to quarters, Thomas found Ruth on her stoop, pipe smoke curling like incense. 70 winters etched her face, survivor of auctions, partings, yet her spirit burned like Moses' bush. Evenin', Thomas. Your pilgrimage done? Aye. Patterson quiver like Cain marked? He does. She puffed thoughtfully. They'll turn, boy. Fear sours to venom. Accident or frame, clever as serpents. I know. Why persist? Let dread fester unseen. Practicality, reminders keep edges sharp. But truth? Those steps are liberty's breath, moments where I'm sovereign, not chattel. Power's taste sustains the soul. Ruth nodded, eyes wise as prophets. Caged freedom's illusion. Flee north records as passport to freemen. And forsake kin? No. Chains bind us collective, breaking mine abandons theirs to deeper hell. The night deepened, stars wheeling overhead, eternal witnesses to this dance of sin and redemption. Thomas lay on his pallet, mind wandering to African shores, ancestral spirits whispering of justice deferred but inevitable. In George's heart, a slave held empires in thrall, his silence louder than thunder, his presence a harbinger of reckoning. Guilt's chains, forged in secrecy, now bound the mighty proof that divine scales balance, often through the least expected hands. The night air carried the scent of pine resin and distant wood smoke as Thomas sat beside Ruth on the weathered cabin steps. Crickets hummed a restless chorus, their rhythm echoing the pulse of unspoken fears across the quarters. The moon hung low in blood orange, a celestial witness to covenants broken and promises unkept, much like the moon that lingered over Gethsemane when betrayal unfolded in shadows. You don't owe them your life, Thomas, Ruth repeated, her voice gravelly with age and wisdom earned through decades of witnessed atrocities. Her pipe glowed faintly, casting fleeting embers that danced like lost souls seeking rest. Use what you know to save yourself. Hundreds remain enslaved, let them find their own paths. Survival ain't selfishness, it's the first commandment of this hell. Thomas stared into the darkness, where fireflies flickered like hesitant prayers. Maybe not, he conceded, the words heavy as iron shackles. But for 12 years I've guarded those records like the Ark of the Covenant, fragile, sacred, lethal to touch. Running would render every midnight walk, every silent confrontation, meaningless. If I stay, perhaps I can leverage this burden into something greater than self-preservation. A crack in the foundation. Ruth exhaled smoke that curled upward like incense from an altar. Or you'll die, boy, and drag the rest of us down. The powerful don't forgive threats, they crush them when fear turns to desperation. He rose slowly, joints aching from the day's endless labor. Perhaps. But at least I'll die standing as a man, not kneeling as property. Better the grave than perpetual half-life. She shook her head, sorrow etching deeper lines into her weathered face. Brave fool. The Lord tests the righteous, but this is walking into the lion's den daily. Thomas entered his cabin, the door creaking like a lamentation. The space was sparse, a thin cornshuck mattress, a three-legged stool, walls patched with newspaper scraps that whispered forgotten headlines. He pried loose the floorboard with practiced care, revealing his hidden sanctuary, a worn pencil stub, pilfered paper sheets yellowed at edges, and his personal journal. Not the damning duplicates hidden in hollow trees and buried jars across 3 counties, visited only biannually under cover of storms. This was intimate scripture. He wrote by candlelight, flame sputtering as moths battered the glass. August 17, 1857. Mrs. Hartley received the journal tonight. the seed of knowledge planted. By now Richard will have confessed the depths, ships like floating tombs, souls bartered for coin. Another family bears the cross of complicity. Ruth urges flight north. Wisdom in her words, yet flight concedes that power remains the birthright of the pale and propertied. I will not grant that victory. Not while breath lingers. He sealed the entry, hid the journal, and lay down. Sleep arrived fitfully, haunted by visions of African rivers turned red with blood, of his mother's final gaze before separation, of ledgers whose ink stains souls eternally. Thomas was Georgia's most formidable slave architect of dread, yet also its most precarious, one misstep from the noose before dusk. That duality was its own crucifixion, a psychological torment no overseer's lash could rival. By the blistering summer of 1859, the bizarre ritual had ossified into normalcy. Younger eyes, unscarred by the operation's origins, accepted Thomas's liberty without question. Sarah Hartley, 17 that July, hovered on the precipice between girlhood and harsh awakening. She had glimpsed Thomas since infancy, the enigmatic figure gliding through their halls thrice weekly, prompting her father's whispered conferences and her mother's tightened lips. But true comprehension dawned on an oppressively humid night when insomnia drove her to the kitchen for water. Bare feet silent on pine floors worn smooth by generations of enslaved labor, Sarah navigated the darkened hallway. Candlelight leaked from her father's study door, left ajar like an invitation from fate. Voices drifted, her father's strained baritone, and another, deeper, commanding yet restrained. Propriety warred with curiosity, the latter prevailed. She pressed to the gap. "We cannot endure this indefinitely," Richard Hartley murmured. "You know it." "I know it." The reply carried measured gravity, "Forever spans eternity. I concern myself with today alone. War brews, Union victory might liberate me, Confederate triumph might entrench chains deeper. I cannot master unknowns." Thomas. Richard sighed, the name confirming Sarah's suspicion. "If freedom comes, your leverage dissolves. You could simply walk away. And if slavery persists 50 more years? My protection gains potency. What do you truly desire, Thomas, if all barriers fell?" A profound pause stretched, pregnant with eternity. Sarah leaned closer, breath held. "I yearn to witness every smuggler of souls stand accountable before true justice, not the courtroom farce where humans are chattel. I seek equity untwisted, where family bonds endure unbroken. I want my daughter to breathe free air." Sarah's heart seized. Daughter. Thomas, the spectral intruder, possessed a child. "You have offspring?" Richard's shock echoed. "Born last month. Lily from Bradford's holdings. Bradford remains ignorant, for now. Do not inquire her location, I learned discretion from your example. That child enters a transformed world, Mr. Hartley. I will ensure it, through legal upheaval or the record's revelation." "I hope you succeed," Richard said softly. "What we wrought haunts my every breath." "Good," Thomas replied, voice flint-hard as Mosaic law. "It should. Peace eludes the unrepentant." Footsteps neared. Sarah fled to her room, pulse thundering like war drums. Thomas spoke to her father as peer or superior, unbowed. The puzzle coalesced, a slave father wielding apocalypse over the county's mighty. In subsequent weeks, Sarah observed. With fresh acuity. Prominent men hunched as if Atlas bore their sins, shoulders curved under invisible yokes, eyes darting like hunted prey. Thomas traversed town with regal poise, white men parted like the Red Sea, expressions blending hatred and terror. Judge Kent fumbled his cane, Franklin Bradford crossed streets to evade proximity. She rifled her father's study during absences, uncovering veiled references, Georgia coastal matter, attorney letters probing statutes of limitations, Judge Kent's terse note, position maintained. No alterations. Then, attic exploration yielded treasure and curse. Beneath quilts, a locked metal box. Keys pilfered from Richard's desk drawer, 3 attempts until the tumblers yielded. Inside, the leather journal. For 3 hours Sarah read, sunlight slanting through dormer windows like accusatory beams. The smuggling's horrors unfolded, nightingale voyages claiming hundreds in holds reeking of death, cargo tallied like cattle, bribes greasing palms of sheriffs and judges. Thomas featured repeatedly, meticulous scribe noting names, ages, family clusters. Entries chilled. Thomas's precision extraordinary, records families intact. Harper fears excess knowledge. Yet thoroughness shields us. Thomas inquired if labor earns freedom. Harper scoffed, I noted calculation in his gaze. Mistake granting such insight? Venture concludes. Thomas delivered final accounts. Harper urged elimination. Voted to retain enslavement with privileges. Sarah replaced everything meticulously, collapsing against a trunk. Her father, not merely owner, but federal criminal facing hanging. Thomas, sole barrier between noose and neck. Complicity's weight crushed her. Dinner that evening crackled with undercurrents. Richard's hands trembled, Elizabeth picked at her plate. Sarah's gaze pierced. Papa, she ventured, voice steady as a prophet's rebuke. Do you regret past ventures? The investments years ago? Fork halted midair. Elizabeth paled. Silence. Descended like plague darkness. What prompts this? Richard asked carefully. Contemplating my future husband, home. I seek honor, ethics even amid hardship. One who sleeps untroubled. Ripples spread. Choices forced by circumstance, Richard hedged. World defies novel simplifications. Yet distinguish difficult from wicked, Sarah pressed. We own souls, reap their toil. Morality demands discourse. Elizabeth intervened, inappropriate. 17 suffices for right and wrong, Sarah countered. Do you rest peacefully, Papa? Do sins haunt? Does accountability beckon? Richard met her eyes, defeated. No peace. Yes, accountability daily. Good, she nodded. You should. She excused herself, leaving stunned quietude. That night, Sarah resolved, crimes irreversible, but silence complicit no longer. She would bear truth inwardly, poised for justice's summons, small act, yet seat of redemption. The conspiracy's tendrils ensnared beyond originators. By 1860, Sheriff Coleman had falsified logs, intimidated witnesses. Dr. Pritchard certified smuggled children Virginia-born, lending medical veneer to fraud. Mayor Harrison deflected federal probes. Reverend Matthews accepted blood-tainted tithes, preaching morality while averting eyes. Fear transcended law, social annihilation loomed. Ruined reputation exiled families, poisoned marriages, cursed legacies. June 1860, Bradford Estate hosted secret conclave. Servants banished, arrivals staggered, doors sealed. Whiskey poured. Bradford opened, 12 years under Thomas's yoke. Options demand revisit. We've circled this, Judge Kent wearied. Caution paralyzed decisiveness. Decisive? Patterson snarled. Murder? Eliminate threat, Bradford admitted. Copies? Richard queried. Bluff perhaps, Bradford countered. Pritchard interjected, 3 years passed, my son assaulted Thomas. Stopped by words, you examined 73 children under 5, certified Virginia births, sold New Orleans bound. Instructions to 3 unknown. Custodians, failure triggers delivery. Exact number absent our ledgers. Silence thundered. Copies real. Time, Judge Kent mused. Thomas, 35. We older, 50s, 60s. Patterson nears 70. His death precedes ours, instructions executors bribeable. When he dies, Richard countered, evidence unleashes. Children bear shame. Better them, Bradford muttered. Richard stood, planning natural death while praying precedents? Cowardice. We birthed this through greed, smuggling souls defying God's image and all. Easy for you, Bradford retorted. Your wealth predated venture. No sum justifies human trafficking, Richard said. We profited, now reap whirlwind. Meeting dissolved unresolved. Burdens persisted. Yet Thomas's soul fixated on family. Lily, 22, Bradford Fields 3 miles distant, strong, resilient, met at Plantation gathering. Love defied ownership edicts, Thomas's visits unhindered by terrified Bradford. Pregnancy complicated, child owned by Bradford, yet Thomas's blood conferred peril. We must extract her, Lily whispered, hand on belly, moonlight silvering their stolen hour. Disappearance collapses my edifice, Thomas replied. They'd purge evidence, slaughter witnesses. I'll flee with her. Trackers, dogs, property theft charges. Silence. No solution. Grace born August 1859, unnamed officially, yet cherished. Early months in Bradford quarters, Thomas visited covertly. Bradford feigned blindness, antagonism invited ruin. At 6 months, Thomas confronted during visit, I seek to purchase Grace's freedom. Bradford startled, slaves own not. Information instead, secrets shifting power among you. Betray fellows? Without pause. Prefer transaction. If refused? Remember your cruelty when records decide fates. Closest Thomas neared open threat. Bradford pondered long. Freedom paper-bound, practically enslaved. Lily unfree, you unfree. Thomas's gaze burned with biblical resolve, echoing Joseph's rise from pit to power, or Moses negotiating Pharaoh. Love's gamble amid retribution's shadow. Divine scales tipped slowly, but inexorably toward justice. The Bradford study reeked of aged tobacco and polished oak, the air thick with the residue of unspoken sins. Candle flames danced erratically in silver holders, casting elongated shadows that twisted across wallpaper depicting idyllic fox hunts, ironic scenes of pursuit, given the hunted expressions on the men's faces. Franklin Bradford's desk, a massive mahogany relic inherited from his father, bore the scars of nervous fingernails and spilled ink, testaments to years of tormented correspondence. Thomas stood before it, his fine coat absorbing the dim light like a shroud, his posture unyielding as a pillar in Solomon's temple. She possess freedoms denied us, Thomas pressed, his voice steady, resonant with the weight of generations. Northward bound, fostered by free kin who could shield her from this accursed land. Bradford's laugh was bitter, echoing like the hollow ring of Judas's silver. Or snatched back into bondage. Free papers? Mere parchment against greed. You know the tales, escaped property claims overriding law, dragging souls back to chains. Thomas's eyes, dark pools reflecting ancestral fires, fixed on Bradford. I offer you a sliver of redemption. Be less the monster you've become. Accept, or etch your refusal in eternity's ledger. Bradford rose, footsteps muffled on the Persian rug, approaching his iron safe embedded in the wall like a confessional vault. With trembling hands, he extracted a blank manumission form, yellowed paper heavy with legal incantations, the instrument of rare mercy in a system built on cruelty. Quill scratched across it, inking Grace's name, her birth's approximate dawn, her elevation from chattel to free. No coin exchanged, Bradford muttered, signing with a flourish that belied his defeat. Not mercy's gift, but exhaustion's surrender. Weary of fearing the man I should command, of shadows leaping at every creak. If one child's liberty buys fleeting peace, damn it, so be it. He thrust the document forward. Legal. Freedom, Thomas. Not sanctuary. Grasp the chasm. I do, Thomas replied, folding the paper reverently, tucking it into his coat's inner sanctum, next to his heart, where hopes beat fragile rhythms. Then depart my domain. Thomas paused at the threshold, the door's brass knob cold as judgment's gavel. Gratitude, he whispered, the word hanging like incense. Bradford's retort cracked like a whip, spare thanks. Weakness birthed this, not virtue. We both discern the rot. That night, Thomas traversed the moonlit path back, the document a talisman against despair. Not absolute safeguard, Bradford's warning rang true, but a divine crack in the fortress of oppression. In a realm where enslaved lives were scripted in blood and toil, one chance gleamed like manna in the wilderness, provision unforeseen, sustenance for the soul's long march. Sarah Hartley's revelation shattered her world like the veil torn in the temple, exposing hypocrisies long veiled. Raised in the cocoon of privilege, she'd imbibed the doctrine of hierarchy, whites as divinely ordained stewards, blacks as wards in need of guidance, slavery a regrettable but scriptural necessity, echoing twisted interpretations of Ham's curse or Ephesians' bonds. Sermons from Reverend Matthew's thundered justifications, governesses wove tales of benevolent mastery, adult whispers reinforced the illusion of moral order. But the Attic Journal unveiled the abyss, respected pillars of society, her father included, plunging into crimes meriting the noose, defying even their hypocritical laws. These men cowered before Thomas, whose intellect and resolve outshone their tarnished facades. Not inferior, but exalted in integrity, Thomas embodied the parable of the least becoming greatest, the stone rejected turning cornerstone. Once glimpsed, truth blinded like Saul's Damascus light. Sarah noticed anew, slaves addressed as mute tools, casual brutalities dismissed as discipline, elaborate rationales propping luxury on broken backs. Lies, all comforting deceptions masking the theft of divine image-bearers. She ventured to the kitchen, where aromas of cornbread and stew mingled with the sweat of ceaseless labor. Engaging house slaves, not as servants, but souls, she learned names: Eliza, whose laugh hid scars; Josiah, separated from kin at auction like Joseph's betrayal. Stories poured forth, families rent asunder, dreams crushed under whips, hopes flickering like candles in gales. Elizabeth noted the shift, her embroidery needle pausing mid-stitch. Sarah, familiarity breeds contempt. They occupy their sphere, we ours. Sphere? Sarah's retort sharpened like a prophet's sword. They are persons, mother, bearing God's likeness, hearts aching as ours. Acknowledged, dear. Yet order preserves society. Overstep, and boundaries blur. Or consciences awaken, Sarah countered, eyes flashing with nascent fire. Elizabeth's gaze hardened. You echo abolitionists. Perilous in these parts, for you, for us. Sarah swallowed fury, her father's sins merited exposure, his dread a foretaste of Gehenna. But destruction avenged nothing, smuggled souls scattered, wounds unhealed. Instead, she sought enlightenment covertly, Frederick Douglass's narratives, Stowe's indictments, abolitionist tracts smuggled like forbidden fruit. Possession risked lashes or worse in Georgia's vigilant climate. She observed Thomas's visits with reverence, his stride dignified, eyes vigilant as watchmen's lamps. No servility, quiet authority, a living rebuke to supremacy's myth. One twilight, folly seized her. In the library, shelves groaning with leather-bound tomes on law and theology, she awaited his minute's sojourn. Thomas entered, halting at her presence. "Miss Hartley," he intoned, voice low as a confessor's warning. "This encounter unwise." "My domain," she replied, chin lifted. "Why bar me? You comprehend the peril." She rose, resolve steeling her. "I unearthed father's journal from the attic vault. I fathom your leverage, there." Terror. Thomas's facade held, but his eyes deepened like wells drawing eternal truths. Then grasped dialogue's danger to us both. Indifferent, she pressed. "Aid me offer." "Aid?" Echoed skepticism. "Uncertain how. Yet father's deeds evil incarnate. Accountability beckons. Safeguard your records from sabotage." He appraised her eternally. 17 summers? Affirmative. Youth clings to justice's purity. Maturity tempers with caution. He edged doorward. Silence serves best. Preserve innocence. Rebuilding awaits, conscience is vital then. Insufficient, she protested. Action now. Desire differs from wisdom. Exposure ruins your kin, achieves not for victims, dispersed across states, chains reforged. Then record's purpose? Shield, safeguard, perhaps testimony. Never vengeance. Poisonous fruit. At threshold, war looms, Miss Hartley evident as gathering storms. Align with righteousness. Wield privilege for the oppressed. Atonement thus. He vanished before retort, leaving Sarah quivering, not heroic, but humbled. Her impulse rooted in self-absolution, not pure altruism. Yet prophecy rang, conflict brewed, Kansas bloodied, Congress fractured, slavery's debates venomous as vipers. Choices loomed, she prayed for fortitude to choose light. Not all endured dread passively. Carl Vicksburg, Patterson overseer, brute forged in violence's furnace, joined post-smuggling.
Ignorant of specifics, he chafed at Thomas's liberties.
Ain't godly, he grumbled over moonshine, firelight etching his scarred face.
Negro strutting like lord. Needs rectifying. Patterson permits, countered a peer. Softened or blackmailed. Appends order.
Vicksburg surveilled, plotting accidents or provocations warranting lashes. One starless eve, post-visit, he intercepted Thomas's path. Whip coiled like serpent. Boy, snarled Vicksburg.
Pass for nocturnal wanderings? Mr. Patterson aware. Ain't inquired. Written sanction?
Unnecessary for sanctioned paths.
Rules mandate. Absent? Discipline due.
Whip ascended, grin wolfish. Thomas unflinching, Mr. Vicksburg, ponder, 3 years observing privileges.
Questioned why. Instructed silence. So? Query, what grants slave dominion over Patterson, devourer of lesser men? Tolerance for insolence meriting gallows? Grin wavered.
Information, Thomas continued.
Destructive to counties mighty. Safeguarded if harmed, unveiled. All suffer. Uninvolved. But Patterson entangled. His ruin? Your fate? Whip descended. Bluff. Strike. Witness Dawn's repercussions, dismissal, exile. Standoff in gloom.
Vicksburg yielded.
Rage fermented, spilling in rants, liquor fueled. A concerned overseer alerted Patterson. Office summons, threats against Thomas? Observations, sir. Unnatural. Desist utterly. Ignore existence or depart. Why, sir? Mere. Untouchable. Patterson thundered. Evidence dooms me to noose. Arrangements publicize if harmed. Privileges? Survival's cost. Crimes? Buried eternally. Choose, accept bounty, or vanish.
Vicksburg stayed, but seeds sprouted.
Discreet inquiries pieced smuggling mosaic. Profit beckoned extortion, sale to authorities, or conspirators. Others mirrored, fragments breeding opportunism. Thomas's fear foundation quaked, morphing to desperation's quake.
The Civil War's eruption, South Carolina's secession December 1860, Georgia's January 1861, Sumter's fall April, heralded apocalypse. Conspirators' dread amplified, order crumbling, federal swords potentially piercing secrets, Confederate triumph perpetuating bondage or liberty's dawn dissolving leverage. Patterson convened remnants June 1861, Bradford estate shrouded in secrecy. Kent deceased, naturally, fear interred. War alters all, Patterson intoned.
Union victory emancipates Thomas, Confederate eternal yoke.
Eliminate pre-invasion, he urged.
Copies? Bradford queried. Chaos veils.
Accident amid strife, deserters, sympathizers.
Records lost in maelstrom.
Murder, Richard declared.
Name it. Survival. Cowardice. Greed spawned this, confess, dignify death.
Uproar, principles clashed with terror. Faction split, Patterson's quintet for violence, Richard's quartet for endurance, waverers passive. Thomas' new network of whispers, slaves' ears, free blacks' rumors, conscience-stricken whites.
Cabin's solitude, options weighed. Flight north, Lily and Grace in tow, records bargaining for sanctuary. Yet abandonment betrayed kin, work nullified. Preemptive exposure, hangings, confiscations, justice partial. Backlash lethal in Confederate realm. Third path, vanished strategically. July 1861 moonless, possessions bundled, savings clutched, walked a free black enclave 15 miles distant. Cabins nestled in woods, veiled from prying eyes. Precarious freedom, yet resilient networks. Naomi welcomed, duration hidden? Months, war's evolution. Danger trails? Yes.
Visibility endangers others.
Absence breeds uncertainty. Whispers name you doorwalker, record keeper. Protection, triplicate, custodians ignorant mutually. Wise. Shelter granted, labor exchanged. Months blended, repairs, accounts, letters, strength and literacy assets. 2 clandestine journeys, one to Lily, entrusting Grace's papers, another securing records guardians. War's thunder neared, divine retribution's storm brewing. Thomas's eclipse forced the guilty to confront mirrors, sins reflected, unredeemed. The free black settlement nestled deep in the Pine Barrens, 15 miles from Patterson's sprawling fields, felt like a breath held too long finally released. Cabins of rough-hewn logs and salvaged tin roofs stood in irregular clusters, smoke curling from chimneys like prayers ascending. Here, freedom was fragile, always one false claim, one bounty hunter away from re-enslavement, but it was real. Naomi's cabin, where Thomas found shelter, smelled of pine resin, cornbread, and the faint metallic tang of ink from ledgers he helped balance for the community. His first secret journey came under a sickle moon in late August 1861. He moved like mist through backwoods trails, avoiding roads patrolled by Confederate conscription squads. At Bradford's quarters, Lily waited in the shadow of a live oak, Grace bundled against her chest. The child's eyes wide, curious, reflected firelight like twin stars. "The papers are safe," Lily whispered, pressing her palm to his. "Hidden beneath the floorboards where no overseer treads. She sleeps free, even if the world doesn't know it yet." Thomas touched Grace's cheek, marveling at skin soft as new cotton. "Keep her close. War devours the innocent first." The second journey took him to the 3 custodians, 2 free blacks in Savannah, 1 trusted former slave in Brunswick, each holding sealed packets, instructions unchanged, deliver only if no contact by appointed dates. He verified seals, exchanged quiet words of caution, then melted back into the night. His absence in the county rippled like a stone dropped in still water. The conspirators, deprived of their daily reminder, fractured under the weight of ambiguity. Was Thomas dead, drowned in some river crossing? Fled north to abolitionist havens? Or lurking, unseen, ready to strike? Patterson, ever the pragmatist, summoned the remnants to Bradford's smokehouse, neutral ground, away from prying eyes. Lanterns cast harsh shadows on hams curing overhead. "He's gone," Patterson declared, voice roughened by whiskey and dread. "North, likely. Threat dissolved. We burn the remnants, letters, ledgers, anything tying us. Craft a unified tale if questions arise." Richard Hartley leaned against a barrel, arms crossed. "If he's fled, we wait. Destroying evidence now creates fresh crimes. We don't compound sin with sin." "You're blind, Hartley," Bradford snapped. "This is liberation. Or deeper damnation," Richard countered. "We wait. Nothing more." The fracture widened, Patterson and Bradford pushing erasure, Pritchard and Hartley advocating stasis, others silent, paralyzed. Then, September 1861, a plain envelope arrived at Bradford's post office box, handwriting unmistakable, Thomas's precise, unadorned script. Inside, 1 page. "I am neither dead nor gone. Arrangements endure. Alterations interpreted as threats will summon response. Proceed as before. No signature. No address." Bradford's hands shook as he showed it to the others. Hope guttered like a candle in wind. Fear surged anew, sharper, colder. Thomas, once visible specter, now phantom. Untraceable. Omnipresent. More letters followed, sparse as judgments, to Acting Judge Carter, to Sheriff Coleman, even to Peripheral Mayor Harrison. Each identical in menace, presence confirmed, vigilance eternal. Patterson's decline accelerated. Robust frame withered, persistent cough rattled like chains in his chest. By 1862, he rarely left his bedchamber, staring at ceilings as if expecting Thomas's shadow to materialize. Bradford drowned nights in decanters, plantation ledgers neglected, yields plummeting. Richard Hartley moved methodically. He sold peripheral lands quietly, converted assets to gold coin hidden in secure vaults. Elizabeth found him one evening counting stacks in the study. "Preparing for aftermath," he explained. If Thomas unleashes the records, no defense holds. Hanging probable. But you and Sarah, you'll need means to endure. Elizabeth touched his wrist. You think time erases federal crimes? Evidence endures. Guilt eternal. She squeezed.
I'm sorry, for complicity, for silence, for benefiting.
We all share the stain, he murmured. Knowing doesn't lighten it. War engulfed Georgia in 1864.
Sherman's march carved a 60-mile scar, plantations torched, railroads twisted, slaves streaming toward bluecoats like Israelites from Egypt.
Union forces reached the county December 1864.
Richard awaited in his study, windows open to winter chill carrying smoke from distant burnings. Captain Morrison entered, young, Boston accent crisp, uniform dust-streaked.
Richard Hartley. Inventorying assets for potential seizure. Understood. Morrison scanned shelves, ledgers. 43 slaves per records. Origins documented? Some. Others, incomplete. Fires, misplacements.
Morrison's gaze sharpened.
Convenient.
From doorway, because some were never meant to exist here.
Thomas stepped forward, older, silver threading hair, dressed in tailored wool coat, boots polished. No deference.
Eyes calm as deep water. Identify yourself, Morrison demanded.
Thomas Freeman. Freedmen's Bureau liaison. Former resident, enslaved here.
Familiar with local histories.
Richard's breath caught. Freeman. A name claimed, not bestowed. Morrison glanced between. You possess knowledge of irregularities? Mr. Hartley and Associates engaged pre-war illegalities. Smuggling souls direct from Africa, federal crimes, death penalty.
Richard closed eyes, awaiting hammer fall.
Thomas continued, yet Union courts may not suit. Victims scattered, dead, untestifiable. Perpetrators aged, broken, psychological torment ongoing. Execution adds corpses, not justice. Morrison frowned. You withhold evidence?
Justice complex, Captain. Mercy sometimes seeds future better than vengeance reaps past.
I've witnessed sufficient death. He met Richard's gaze. Haven't you? Richard nodded mutely, tears tracing.
Morrison departed, conflicted, soldiers trailing.
Alone, Richard whispered, why spare us? Perfect moment to end it. Thomas regarded him. Absence taught clarity. Revenge forges new chains. I could testify, watch next snap.
Or build aid the living, the freed.
Destruction heals nothing.
Mercy, perhaps preserves something.
You deserve punishment. Indeed.
And you'll bear it lifelong.
Guilt harsher than rope. Death quick, remorse eternal. Richard wept openly. Forgive me. Insufficient, but forgive. I hear sorrow. Whether it redeems, unknown. Thomas turned. No more visits. Performances cease. I sever relation. Records remain hidden unless restoration attempted, debt peonage, false arrests, old tyrannies revived. Then exposure absolute. Understood. Thomas departed into dusk.
Richard sat hollowed, 17 years terror dissolved, leaving only self-inflicted wound.
Punishment not in noose, but mirror. Reconstruction's turbulent dawn, new laws, fragile freedoms, night rider terror. Thomas labored with Freedmen's Bureau 3 years, filing claims, solemnizing marriages, establishing schools.
Literacy his sword against bureaucracy's maze.
1866, Lily and Grace joined in Atlanta. Modest rooms, bookkeeper post for Thomas, sewing for Lily. Grace, 7, entered classroom, first formal learning.
Ordinary days, profound miracle.
Records guarded biannually, Reconstruction's fragility demanded insurance. Ku Klux rose, Redeemer backlash brewed. 1868, Sarah's letter arrived, Philadelphia postmark. She'd relocated north, aiding migrant freed people. Dear Mr. Freeman.
Father passed last month.
Heart, doctors claimed, spirit, I believe.
He carried guilt to grave.
Final years, quietly funded black schools. Insufficient atonement, yet gesture. You taught power need not wound, justice may wear mercy's face.
I strive to emulate.
Gratefully, Sarah Hartley. Thomas preserved it.
No reply necessary, truth spoken. Conspirators faded, Patterson 1870, embittered, Bradford 1872, wealth intact yet influence ashes, Pritchard 1873, late. Charity healing beyond bodies, Coleman fled to Texas obscurity.
By 1875, architects gone. World remade. Thomas relocated family Philadelphia 1868. Bookshop opened, modest shelves, steady custom. Grace excelled academically, became teacher. Descendants multiplied, doctors, scholars, artists.
Thomas spoke little of past.
I survived slavery, sufficed. Privately, he wrote, for grace, posterity, smuggling's ledger horrors, men's cowardice, his midnight walks, ultimate choice. Power without compassion births only dread. Vengeance imprisons avenger. Justice and mercy entwine. I could annihilate. Chose not. Destruction heals none. Freedom, refusing victimhood or vengeance's role. Choosing construction over ruin.
They remain chained by deeds, I refuse chains of their making.
True liberty, defining self beyond trauma. Thomas died 1891, 67. Obituary, respected merchant, community anchor.
No mention of power held, mercy granted.
Grace inherited shop, writings shared judiciously with children. Record surface 1923, church demolition, Savannah Historical Society.
Yellowed pages, meticulous logistics, victim counts sans names, deliberate dignity preserved.
One final line, let this stand as testimony, truth endures, whether justice follows or not. No surname. Timeless. Descendants carry oral legacy, power meaningful when withheld. Survival is not equal to victory. Freedom daily built. Philadelphia marker notes businessman, leader omits drama. Fitting, Thomas refused definition by oppressors. Real monument, descendants thriving, freedom secured not through retribution, but restraint. He entered forbidden houses by night. Ultimately, he built his own doors open by right, legacy echoing in lives unbound. The slave who walked through locked doors chose, in mercy's name, to walk away. And in walking away, he unlocked eternity.